Hello, Vlogalogue. That's about. How are you? I'm good, thank you for asking. I got a new lens, so look at all the space, but the lighting and the stuff. I mean, okay, there's tungsten there, LED there, and halogen there, but that's life, and fuck post-production me. Apparent post-production, ooh, I'm swanky now. How cool is it that somebody from, like, the comment section is, like, on the channel? I just think that's great, that, because I get down a lot about the idea that this community is dead and that there's no point in doing anything because Niall's being a depressing, cynical bastard again. But then, like, I start a collab with people that I met on the internet, and then there's cool people that watch our stuff doing on the thing. Fuck, community isn't dead, it's just complicated. I'm looking there, but if that's not you, then that's not you and that's life. Sorry, it'll just look like I'm really distracted by the naked woman behind the camera stand. I wish that was the case. Could shoot some pretty badass porn with this camera. Moving on, some people can be so inconsiderate. Even though they live with a YouTuber, they don't know that I talk to myself regularly. Jumping off from that, I wouldn't really consider this place a home, and I never really have. I suppose my definition of where I would consider home has always come from a place of a feeling that I get rather than any kind of solid, viable criteria. Like, it's just, when I am in this place or doing this thing, I feel at home, at one with myself. And that's all fluffy and weird and not really adding to the conversation. So let me kind of just really explain to you my life, I guess. So, when I was a wee lad, home was, you know, just the place where my little brother and my mum lived. And that was home. That was always just home. If it's interest to you, my mum and my dad have been separated since I was 2, so home was never really where they both are, it was always where my mum was, because the UK legal system when it comes to parenting is fucked and ridiculously skewed in the way of women, excuse my language, and apparent my sexism, but that's just the case. There's no argument to be made there, that's just what happened. So home was always just where those two were, because when we were little, we were really poor. Like, not even like chip on the old block working class poor, like poor. Like, you know, like below the like just poor, proper poor. So I moved from like social housing to social housing all the time, all over the place. So because my parents had separated, we spent every other weekend with my dad. And I remember Sunday nights always sucking. It was one place and it always felt like a home, but we weren't allowed to call it home. So when we were going there on a Friday, we'd be like, yeah, we're going home. And I'd be like, no, you're going from your home to your father's house. And then on Sunday night, it would be, all right, Dad, I think it's time to go home. We'd be like, well, this is your home too. And there was always kind of this internal family conflict always built into this idea of a difference between a house and a home and blah, blah, blah. And eventually, just one day, I was just like, you're both fucking idiots. Your ideas of home are stupid and they make everybody miserable because you're at each other's throats all the time. Grow up. One day I kind of woke up and realised that when I was living with my mum and my brother, I was maybe 14 at the time, that I didn't really consider that house a home either, because it made me miserable living there. To put it in very short terms, the town I lived in was a shithole. Our house was always miserable to be in because everybody was. It didn't feel like. You know how there's the sort of stereotypical families? It didn't feel like that. It felt awful all the time. I was happier at school or sleeping on my friend's floor than I was, you know, sleeping in my own room. That's not to say by any stretch of the imagination I had a bad childhood. I didn't. There are kids out there who have hella times, you know, and their lives get completely destroyed by their home life. Mine was just, it wasn't bad, it was just kind of unhappy. As I got really older, so you're talking 16, 17, 18, I started to understand that home couldn't be attached to a physical place anymore. even, you know, even for most kids who had that physical place of home and, you know, lived in the same town, in the same house forever, they couldn't call that home either because they were growing up the same as I was. And finally, I had people to, like, create home with. Me and just a few of my friends, we just made wherever we were our home, and we became this little, I want to call it a family, and I'm sure they probably would too. And then it was just like our place where we existed, whether it be like in the pub down the street or at all the same table at lunch or whatever. It just, there was this insular group of people who supported each other, and you felt safe and secure, and you could say whatever you liked and be who you were rather than who everyone else was expecting you to be. And that was cool, and everything was fine and happy. And that was my idea of home for a while. But then things and stuff, and I had to start becoming a lot more self-reliant on this idea of home, that home could be essentially, without sounding it cliched, wherever you could lay your bag was your home. Who wrote a song about that? Could be Travelling Man, or The Road I Must Travel, or something by some indie band sometime. Because I mean, I spent most of my time going from house to house or festival to festival and just doing whatever the hell I fancied. And then when I moved away from all that to come to university, you can't really call that home because it's basically a giant's kind of, they build giant rooms and then put you in a tiny one, and then that's where you live, but you can't call that home because it's kind of dingy and horrible and miserable. Not that I had a miserable time there, just the rooms are miserable. So the physical place doesn't feel like a home. But now I don't know. I find I get a sense of home at the strangest times and places. I guess it's because I'm stuck putting a definition on this idea of home that I can't really talk about the idea of home because I don't know exactly what I'm talking about. The idea of home has always been a struggle for me because everyone else is like, well, it's where my mum and dad are and my little sister, and it's where we have Sunday roasts and stuff. And that was never my life. And now that I'm at that awkward stage between moving back in with your parents or finding a decent job and getting a place of your own, ooh, home again has become kind of conflicted in the air at exactly what it is. But if I had to put a definition on home for my life, the world is a fucking awful place, and people in it aren't much better. And home is that place where none of that matters, where the world outside could be burning down, but you walk in through that door, or you see the smiles on those people's faces, and you're home. If that makes any kind of sense. I think that's where I want to leave it, actually. That seems like a good place to leave it.